Hello and welcome back to After the Movies, the show where we talk about movies after you've watched the movie, and today we are talking about a documentary. I'm Luke,
I'm Jonathan.
and we're here talking about, how do you say his name? Yoder?
It's like Jodorowsky. It's with a J, guys.
Yeah,
It's
it's
with
a
a J.
guy who was trying to make a movie called Dune, and so this is his vision for Dune, but because his movie didn't get made, spoiler, it's a documentary about the process that he went through. And Jonathan was like, hey, you're going to like this because you like learning about the process of filmmaking, which is true. And it was a very fascinating experience because like most like geniuses or artistic genius,
Mad geniuses.
yeah, I mean, like there is madness here, and like, is he a genius? I don't know. Like,
He's genius in some of the things he does. I wouldn't say that he is fully a genius.
right. He's really good at attaching people to his projects, getting them to be excited about what he's doing, making them sign on and give him time. I don't know. But the entire thing that I had, like the one thought going through my mind this entire documentary was, where did he get his money? Because clearly he has a lot of it to be like, hey, you move to Paris and we're gonna work on this film together. Or maybe he didn't pay anybody. I don't know. Like, but that was for me. I was like, resources, man. Where did you get them? Because this is mind-bogglingly crazy to me. That was my thought.
Yeah. The interesting thing about this, so in case you don't know, we're probably going to talk more about like what the documentary talked about, the process this man went through and the things he did, because that's kind of the fascinating part about this. The process, like this documentary, how it comes together, like how it shows everything, is well done. I can make a couple comments here and there. Maybe you can make a couple comments, but in essence, the documentary is good. They do a lot of visual storytelling. My favorite stuff they do is when they take the storyboards and the ideas and they show you specifically what he was thinking, because he went through all that work to try to
Yep.
make everything. So you get a chance to see these animations where they actually show you what's going on. Again, show, don't tell. Even though it's a documentary, you got a lot of talking heads. Still, show, don't tell. And they did that very well. On the other side, there's a lot of fade to blacks. There's even fade to blacks like for too long, it feels like, where it's fade to black for emotional resonance. Now, you hear a voice of new interviewer going, Jodorowsky is a back crap crazy dude. And then you slowly fade in, right? That's kind of, so my one flaw for the how they did this, the fade to blacks, and this needs so many of those, but I think they did an excellent job of really showing you who Alejandro is. Like the cat moment just kind of shows you like how he's distracted, how he's thinking, how his mind's a little fried by drugs, like et cetera, et cetera. Like
Yeah.
you get a real picture of who he is, and at the same time they're doing a lot of things visually, and there's a lot of good moments they capture. So the way they made this movie, this documentary, is good. I don't know if you have any thoughts on the how they made this documentary or not.
Well, I mean, like the cat scene, the first time when like they're just sitting there, and he's now like the cat's making noise, and he's like, oh, and like the cat, and they, and then we're still on him, and he brings the cat up, and he's still, and I was like, why? Like, I understand that you're showing like this guy's eccentric because he's got this cat running around, but then he just started talking, and I was like, that's why. Because you are showing me that this guy is so out of touch with what you're actually trying to accomplish right now that he's willing to just like pick up his cat and just keep talking like he just didn't miss a beat, but he totally missed like a lot of beats.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was actually, I was like, oh, you just showed me way more about this guy's personality by doing this, because initially you're just like, oh, he just likes his cat and his cat's disrupting him, so he's gonna do. No, he's just like, I got a cat. I'm now. Oh yes, and then this thing. So that was an interesting way of displaying who he is. Yes, the fades to blacks were annoying, and what was interesting is, despite being 90 minutes, this thing felt long, which was amazing because they were covering a lot of ground. Like they were telling us a lot of stuff, and yet it's still like it just had a pace. So
Well, number
yeah.
one, take it with a grain of salt, audience. It's Luke. Second, understand the Jodorowsky, like his Alejandro has the pace of his words. He does not know English. Like he
Right.
does not know it very well, and he is obviously a little cooked up here. So he struggles to find words. Like he's saying things and he's getting it out, and it's interesting things he's saying, but it takes a little time. There's a
It takes a
pacing
while.
that they
Yep.
can't get away from because of the people that are in it. And so if you're making a fictional movie, you cast the person you want, you set the tone you want, you move forward. But you can't do that with a documentary. You've got to go get stuff and then find whatever you got, and that's what they got. So that's why I think the pacing's a little bit
Yep.
slower. So because he's the main central figure,
Yep.
he's telling all the stories, and he's got a certain pace. It's a little slower. So it's not terribly slow. It's
Mm-mm.
just slow enough to be
Yep.
where even I'm like this is a little slow, but that's the thing. It kind of begs the question: the cat moment, the pacing, documentary filmmaking as a whole being so different from fictional narrative
Mm-hmm.
filmmaking, and the kind of the limitations you have and the decisions you have to make where uh, like an editing decision, do you or do you not put the cat moment in?
Right.
How worth it is it?
Right.
Can you really get more from that time he comes back and talks from that long section than if you just cut it out?
Right.
If you're interested in documentary filmmaking behind the scenes and stuff, you get a lot of moments where people are not actually doing the project. It's the thrown off, the moment where you explain something to them because you want them to do something different. I mean, there's all sorts of stuff that's behind the scenes, and that's doc work too. It's just things happen. But the documentary behind the scenes eye is about seeing what the real story is across it all and
Mm-hmm.
really seeing those moments, and it's a different process. If fictional filmmaking is writing and everything is pushing towards these moments and you're looking for things and you're looking for you're trying the actor try something, let's try something new maybe, but you're really still directed by the script, you've got a vision, and then you kind of are deciding the best moments with the vision. The documentary is so much more of the process of finding the
Mm-hmm.
story, that it's very unique, and there's so many more options in a way of what can happen. So it's a unique process, but nonetheless, talking about that's kind of the how the documentary
Mm-hmm.
stuff, right? But the thing that's always fascinating about this is what they're talking about, right? We're both filmmakers. So a guy talking about the filmmaking process, trying to make a movie, going through a lot of work, doing a lot of crazy things, and not coming to pass is, a nightmare slash interesting thing to us. And I have to say, the biggest thing to me, the biggest fascinating thing to me is the people he got together and how he put that team together. As we were discussing a little earlier, the what of what he does is not necessarily any different than any other movie team, right? He's totally a surrealist, indie filmmaker kind of guy. He's like, screw the system.
I'm an
And
auteur. I
right,
do what I want. Yeah.
he's so, he treats filmmaking so differently that he even calls this movie, he thought, it's like a God prophet. Like, I'm making a God prophet that's going to change the world. It's like he
Yep.
personifies it as a God prophet. What?
Yep.
Um,
Yep.
he's just so different in his thinking, but the what he goes through is the same, just like everybody else. He has to do pre-production to get to production to get to post-production. He's doing storyboards. He's getting the right people together. He's trying to get the right team together to make something interesting. And the really fascinating thing is kind of the how he approaches that, because that's how I think the genius shows up. Not only is he somewhat lucky, but also like determined, and
Yeah.
his passion for the project, his over spiritualness for the project is absolutely infectious to
Mm-hmm.
everybody he comes in across, no matter who they are. And his willingness to basically come in every day, invest in the people
Mm-hmm.
involved in the project, and to basically push them to do their best work, but not like you might hear of. Nobody wants the boss that micromanages you. Nobody wants the boss
Right.
that shows up and says, you got to get it done.
Yep.
And that's not what I mean by push. I mean, maybe a better word is draw out. Like, the thing
Yeah.
is, he goes in there, he gives speeches, he tries to inspire you, he talks to you, he supports you, he wants, he's giving you all this information, all these ideas, all these influences, but then he's walking away to let you do what you want to do. He's got this nice tempo to it, and that's
Mm-hmm.
what all the people who worked with him says. They were all invested. Why? Not necessarily because they really think that
His script
his
and story is
script.
so amazing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's not necessarily about that. It's about the fact that they feel valued
Mm-hmm.
and they're being pushed to do some of their best work, and he's finding a way to get them to do some of their
Yep.
best work. And there's something valuable about that.
Yes.
There's something really valuable about that. I don't really want to be Jodorowsky, but I think there's something valuable about what he does there
Yeah.
and his way of dealing with the team. I am a big believer in the process of filmmaking being just as important, if not more important, than the movie, the finished product you get out of it. Kubrick, I would suggest to you, is the absolute opposite, though he obviously believes in his craft. He has a process. He is certainly very important to him, but his goals in that process, to George Lucas's goals in that process, to Michael Bay's goals, to Jodorowsky's goals, to my goals, to Luke's goals, and their filmmaking process are all very different, right? And everyone wants an end result that's good, but it's just amazing to watch. Again, the how, all the what is the same. You got to bring people together and you got to make something. But how do you do it? If you look at Michael Bay, he gets some really talented people together and he pushes them. He absolutely is pushing. He is known as, people call him a dictator, a totalitarian kind of like force. He pushes beyond the limits of what's supposed to happen. Union says, you can only work for so long, and then they have to take a break, and he doesn't let them. He says, get it done, and he leaves, and he comes back, and he's like, are you done? Like, there are stories about Michael Bay doing those kinds of things.
Stories with Kubrick as well.
Right?
47 takes, and it's like, no, just again and again. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and he notoriously, Kubrick, absolutely harassed Shelley Duvall and made her personally, as a human being, not as the character, like, made her cry, made her in pain, pushed her, insulted her acting, everything, like, did everything he could intentionally to get a very distressed action out of her for the movie. I am absolutely against that philosophy. I just am. I'm a totally different way. You've got these people who are pushing and looking for their very specific detailed thing. Meanwhile, you've got a guy like George Lucas who, by all intents and purposes, though, again, we've never worked on some of these people. I'm not trying to badmouth anybody, but from what we know from behind the scenes, from what we know about how they operate in their finished products too, George Lucas has a certain air of at least absolute control. He wants to do his thing his way. He's kind of got, in interviews, I personally have sensed an arrogance that comes out of him. And in Star Wars and some of the stuff that we love that comes from him, American Graffiti, those things, he was doing things to push the boundaries, but he had a mix where the studio wouldn't let him go too far, and he had people around him that he couldn't quite say no to. And so he had to be collaborative, and to his benefit, whether he liked it or not, to his benefit. The prequels are the great thing we all bring up against George Lucas, but there's a reason why, and there's something to be seen there. He is doing what he wants to do to the nth degree. No one's saying no, and that's the biggest problem.
Whereas Jodorowsky is going in and saying, look, I have my vision, and it's going to be amazing. It's going to change the world, and I want you to do your best work to make that happen. And so he's allowing his people to bring what they have to bear and make that thing happen. And that is cool, because when I look out at filmmaking, it is very much a collaborative thing. And we're now starting to work on the next project, hopefully. And, working on it, it's like, well, I've got my vision and I've got my ideas, but I absolutely need people who are smarter than I to come in at other elements and say, yeah, here's how you're going to make that better. Here's how we're going to make this thing even more. And so to see Jodorowsky doing that was pretty exciting. It was pretty cool to see that process. But at the same time, he's like so far out, so crazy, and he wants to do so many weird things that it comes to a point where it's like, well, but we don't really trust you to execute the way that needs to be done to make that happen. And so there's a balance between like art, which obviously we want to make, but then also like the business side of things. And he's like, get rid of the business side. And clearly he did for some stuff.
Well, I wouldn't even necessarily say the business. I mean, it's every artist's dream in a sense to not have to worry about money and just do your art, right? It's not necessarily the business or the industry that's the problem. It's the he's so for instance, to give you an example, since I can't seem to come up with the words, he's so investing in the people that he will change things depending on the people he wants. And that's on the first hand glance, of course you do that. Like, yeah, they say this, if you think it's a good idea, you go with it.
Yep.
But when does that stop? Right. There's a reason why it's a hierarchy in filmmaking. Mm-hmm. There's a director. He's a dictator of sorts. He's the person in charge. He makes the decisions. Mm-hmm. Things have to go through him. And there's a reason for that. Because people can have very wide, various great things to do, but they have to be a part of the same movie. Mm-hmm. They have to go the same direction. There has to be a director. There has to be something going on there. Mm-hmm. If Jodorowsky fails in that regard, he fails on the side of, willing to let them all do their own thing so much that the movie might not even
Mm-hmm.
feel connected. But he's okay with that because he's a surrealist. And his mindset, his philosophy, everything he does is so spiritual, but spiritual
Mm-hmm.
without any sort of anchor, any sort
Right.
of bounds or rules or anything he's really going towards. It's so full of direction to be creative that it's actually directionless. That's a dangerous place to be in
Mm-hmm.
art too, because that's, I mean, you can get some really fascinating, cool things out of it, but if you want to get a certain project done, somebody has to get you there. All works of art, all stories have a beginning, middle, and end. And the ones that don't really work. They're not, they
Right.
might be fascinating, they might be interesting, they might have some sort of emotional content, and that's great, but they're lacking. It's just the way it is. There's a structure to things. And so, yeah, thinking about the balance of how do you deal with people, how do you make films, and his genius in giving them so much support, and at the same time his absolute failure in this surrealist mentality of just whatever happens happens to an extent. Like, I will just change whatever and do whatever. No, I'm not going to make it an hour and a half. I'm going to make it 12 hours. No, I'll make it
Right.
20 hours. I'll make it whatever I want to make it. And that's part of him to being rebellious to the system. But
Right.
yeah, how does Steven Spielberg make the movies he does? How does George Lucas? How does Ridley Scott? How does Christopher Nolan? All these guys are great artists, and they have lots of great artists around them, and they have skills and abilities. And we joke about. I mean, I always think about Ridley Scott being the guy who's really excellent at making a world that feels real. No matter if it's science fiction, if it's a period piece, he just makes the world come alive, right? At the same time, I don't think Ridley Scott's strength is in story development, script development. He can tell a story well. I don't know that he can necessarily come up with a very good story, and I say that because of things like Prometheus, which, though written by Damon Lindelof, and I give him a lot of crap, Ridley is the one who's coming up with the concepts, and he's letting that be the story. You've got to find people who are able to strengthen you where you're weak,
Mm-hmm.
and it is a fascinating collaborative process that can be really beautiful and really awesome, or be an absolute disaster. And Jodorowsky's Dune is kind of the quintessential, in a way, just a really cool look at that.
Mm-hmm.
Man of La Mancha for Terry Gilliam is the classic documentary you show when you want to see how a movie blows up, how it
Mm-hmm.
goes wrong. And there's levels of collaboration and problems in that too. But Jodorowsky's Dune is such a fascinating look at the creativity, and that's the other thing. What really comes out of that entire project? What's the thing they end with in that movie? They say, well, that book went to every studio, and all these other people took ideas and all the creative work these other people had done and did something with it that was structured,
Mm-hmm.
right? And somebody else, Dan O'Bannon, the special effects guy, goes and makes Alien, right? And who works with him? H.R. Giger, right? He comes in and he makes this. He makes the Alien that we all know, iconic, right? And they did it in part because they're being inspired by this
Mm-hmm.
time in making the Dune stuff. But what's the Dune thing really about? It's not really about Dune.
Right.
It's really about making all their stuff. It's fascinating. And so that's when you go and you see all the things that are in all the movies, you're like, okay, but would you have rather watched Raiders of the Lost Ark or Jodorowsky's Dune, what you saw,
The
right?
12-hour version.
Right?
Yeah.
Would you rather watch Alien or Jodorowsky's Dune? Would you rather watch any of the Star Wars? Would you rather watch Star Wars or Jodorowsky's Dune? And I think the answer is, I mean, there's going to be always people who want to see Jodorowsky's Dune, but I think as a whole, in a generality, I think most people would choose any one of those movies, and we know them, right? We never got a chance to see this movie, but I think if we did get this movie, it would be a lot of great ideas, but not a very good whole. Meanwhile, all these other movies are good wholes that took some of the good ideas. It's a fascinating process, a fascinating thing.
And what we have here, and one of the things that I liked about the progression of this, is that you do kind of get to see the good parts, at least, of Jodorowsky's vision for Dune, and with all the cutting out of all the storyboard elements and all that stuff, and animating and moving everything forward, you kind of get this vibe of what this film could have been, and that's interesting. But it really is this thing about like what is creativity? How does creativity work together? And what do when you've got this brilliant, mad idea that's not rooted in anything other than just this metaphysical something out there that's in this whole Messiah God film that he's going to put together?
Well, it's kind of fascinating because I wonder if it's also an argument between like the surrealist movement and sense and structure and all these kinds of things. Like it's really an argument about that kind of philosophy. But there's also again the way that movie ends and the way the things it influenced. You know, we wouldn't have the things we have today to some extent without those same people going through that time in their
Mm-hmm.
lives and doing that.
Yep.
And so there's a place and a process and an importance to the pure creativity time.
Yep.
That place where you don't have to worry about the structure and you just do and you just go and you go and you go and you go. That does produce great stuff. But if you really want to go somewhere with it, you do all that producing, and then you've got to come back to it or move on, and then structure yourself in something. So those artists do some great work because of that time where they didn't have like a first draft, like a free form writing, right? You don't just give people your free form writing and expect them to love it, even if they look at it and think there's wonderful things in there. That's not the book you sell. That's not the story that makes the impact that lasts for years.
Creativity requires the time to put into developing the skills to doing that kind of stuff. And there's nothing wrong with producing a tremendous amount. In fact, everybody says you have to produce a tremendous amount of work, and that is the key to success. And so, Dune here with this book of content, it is a tremendous amount of work, which then kind of sparks what comes out of the film industry after that, which is pretty awesome. So if you're interested in filmmaking, if you're interested in creativity and madness, if you're interested in the 60s and the early 70s, this could be a very interesting documentary for you to watch. So yeah. Check it out and enjoy filmmaking because it's really cool.
It is.
Thank you guys so much for joining us for After the Movies. Tune in next time when we talk about something else.
Later.